So this is part two, and I'm going to try to pick up where I left off. And I decided to just do this one after the other because my train of thought will be broken, and then it'll be like, to you guys on the other end, you'll say, hey, you didn't really pick up where you left off, so this is totally confusing. So, and actually, it's been about 20 minutes since I left off. But anyway, so I left you with, we moved up to Walton Mountain, as I like to call it, living in the woods um, at my mother-in-law's spread. Much like country folk, they had a lot of stuff. Cars, not too many. They had an extra car. They had tons of tools, boats, just all kinds of weird, random stuff laying around. And I mean, it wasn't messy. It was pretty organized. And then they had a garage full of just everything: snow blowers and, oh my golly, tools and 10,000 screws and bolts and nuts and nails and some extra roofing material and cans of paint and blah, blah, blah. So, um, fortunately for me, there was a pickup truck there, and it was a pretty stout one. And actually, I still have it to this day. It's really old, but it seems to run real well. It's expensive to maintain because it's a diesel, so it's like, good grief. Those mechanics that work on diesel trucks, they charge a lot. Uh, so anyway, I went back and forth to the dump from their house. I can't even tell you how many times, and I got to know Facebook Marketplace, and most of it we just gave away because the thing I realized up there with her stuff or their stuff, and then as well as my own stuff that I've been trying to clean up my own house, nobody wants any of it. We have all this junk, but nobody wants any of our junk. We think it's worth something, but can't sell it. It's all just junk. Can't even hardly give it away to the Goodwill or the Salvation Army. Even they're picky now. But anyway, we cleaned up her house. We got it sold. That took a little bit of time, maybe 2 months. And then once it went into escrow, we decided to move. So we left Walton Mountain and returned home. Oh, I kind of left off the part about, though, the kids were doing all their homeschool from up there. That was a blast because it wasn't homeschool per se, it was remote learning. So they were still going to school in our old state, and then we were actually living in another state doing this kind of, I don't know, it was really strange. It was distance learning, so they were mimicking the whole day of school online, but it was really just a waste of time because it took so much time to do recess and getting kids to be quiet and all this other stuff. And as they were doing that, we actually kind of started traveling because the phone, I had the internet, so we would go into town and we would, if that flickering's coming on, I have to have this other light on here because the light from the window's too bright, so I shine a light in my face. And again, I'm not spending any money unless I make some. So, but anyway, I got this stupid LED light. You can see it kind of flickers, but I have to do it, otherwise there's this big glow in the corner. So anyway, we were up in the, we would travel, we'd go into town, or we'd take a little day trip here and there, and we'd check in at the school, and they'd be like, where are you? And we would tell them, and they're like, you're traveling? And we said, yeah, we'd just check in for these classes and listen to the lessons and then just do the work at home. So that was what got me to do homeschooling, because they were spending really about an hour and a half worth of instruction time. And so I was like, boy, I could just do this online with something. And that's what we did. And they haven't been back to school since, because it was just like, it wasn't like a fear of, the coronavirus, as it were, but it was just like I said, too much time was wasted, and I figured we could do stuff. But anyway, so we moved back home. The big house is gone, so now my mother-in-law moves with us. She's got a dog. She's got all of her stuff, and so there's, what is it, 7 people, a dog, and 2 cats living in a 1,200 square foot house, and it was just ridiculous. And so I continued to fix it up a little bit, and I think we lived in that house for, well, quite a while actually, but not continually. We lived there for about a year after moving back from Walton Mountain, and I started losing my mind. There were just so many of us living in the house, and I said, let's just go somewhere. So we took a road trip because we still didn't know where we were going to retire. COVID was kind of getting okay, wasn't so much of a big deal anymore, and you could get out and do stuff and travel. It wasn't locked down so much, although it was that time when everything was a pain in the butt. You'd go to a restaurant and there were no waitresses, and the food menu was all weird and crazy, and everybody wanted $10 tips for $5 food, and It was just nuts. But anyway, we left. That would be 2021, I guess, towards the end of it or something, I think. Yeah, we went on a road trip across America. We thought we were going to retire in like North Carolina, Georgia, or Florida. So I said we should go in the summertime because it's super hot, super muggy, and then we can see if we can tolerate it. And I forgot about the bugs. So anyway, we get out there, and we stopped in Arkansas because we wanted to look there too. And we get out there, and all these places, it was nice and warm, and it was hot, but it was muggy everywhere from Arkansas. Oh, and what was funny is I remember that summer we were trying to escape the wildfires because all the smoke was just so much, and we had to drive all the way to. I think it wasn't until we crossed over the Rocky Mountains is where the smoke finally went away. We had to get down into Wyoming or something, or not Wyoming. Yeah, Wyoming. Before the smoke finally dissipated that summer. That was wild. So we took like 2.5 months on that road trip, and it was a fun road trip. I'd never been never driven across the country before. That was cool. All the states were handling the pandemic differently. Some were kind of more locked up than others, and others were like nothing was even going on. So we went to North Carolina, we went to Georgia, we went to Florida, we even went to the villages. We actually kind of liked it there. It was kind of cool. It was real, I don't want to say Stepford wise, but it was like, I don't know, I hate HOAs, but I like the aspect where all the grass is cut and everything looks nice and there's flower beds and palm trees and everything's manicured because I like gardens. So I like that aspect of it, that everything seemed to be kept up and taken care of. So we spent that time in, we were in Charlotte, then we went to Peachtree City outside of Atlanta, and then we went down to the villages and then over to Tampa. Those were kind of the places we checked out. And this was late 21, so prices were starting to get nuts and my eyeballs were already going out of control. I couldn't believe how much everything cost. And so that was feeding the fire for my I can't take the pile I got and throw it into this because this can't be real. And the lesson I didn't learn, and I learned this in college, and it was like, the more money you throw out into the world, everything's just going to cost more. And without getting political and blah, 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 just the more money floating around, everything's just going to cost more. And I knew that in my head, yet I wouldn't let that explain why everything was costing more. Well, and then it was like a double whammy. It was constrained supply, which makes things goes up. The price of stuff go up, and then there was more money floating around. So it was just a bad thing. So, but anyway, I was completely freaked out, and I was just hoarding my pile, and I was like going, "There's no way I'm going to throw this in the stock market." I was so stupid looking back on it, especially after going through '08. I mean, I wasn't completely as conservative as I was in '08, so at least I didn't completely suffer. But anyway, we didn't buy because all those prices freaked me out. But the reason we ended up not going back there was the bugs and the humidity and the threats of the hurricanes were freaking me out. And I started thinking, I know my personality, much like I mentioned in some other videos with YouTube. I'm a bad personality for this because I'm the kind of guy that will like log in every hour and say, did I get a video? Or log into my investment accounts and say, did it go up? Did it go down? I really work on that, not being that guy, but that's who I am. So I know what would happen is if I lived in Florida, come late September or early September, I'd be online. Are there any hurricanes forming off the coast of Africa? Freaking out. Or is there a cold front coming down from the north going to cause me to have tornadoes? I just know I'd lose my marbles. And I could have the same attitude out west with earthquakes, but the thing is, there's nothing I can do about it. I can't predict them, whereas I could see them coming out there, or I'd know the weather was ripe for hurricanes or tornadoes, and I'd just get nervous. But earthquakes are earthquakes. They just come out of nowhere. They bang your house for like 10, 20 seconds, and you either crumble to the ground or nothing really happens. So whatever. So we went back. It was late 2021 after the road trip, the fun but / failed road trip. And I was like, well, that didn't work. And it was almost Christmas time, and I said, I was getting stir crazy from being in the house, and it was winter again, so I was freezing to death. And I don't like cold, if you can catch that gist. I didn't like the cold. So I told my wife, I go, we're leaving. And she was having some dental work done, and I said, we're just going to go because I'm sick of this. The dentists were like, well, we don't have the material to fix your tooth. And it was just getting ridiculous. I couldn't get appointments because it was late 21 and everyone was like, we're doing you a favor to see you. And I was like, you still charge me a fortune to get the dental work done and you want to act like you're doing me a favor. But I don't know. It was just an annoying time. I know we all went through it. Um, I said, forget it. We'll just go. I says, we'll just get your tooth fixed when we get to Europe. So I looked online. Cheapest tickets I could find were to Spain. So 2 weeks before, just threw the trip all together. And then me, the wife, the 3 kids, we hopped a plane in one-way tickets to, where was it? Valencia? I think that's where we flew. Yeah, I think it was. So we flew to Valencia somehow, but I can't. Oh, I know. We flew to Amsterdam and then from Amsterdam to Valencia. So anyway, we stayed there for 2 months and it was winter, so it wasn't freezing, but it was chilly. 2 months there, and then where did we go after that? Oh, the third month we went to Malaga. And then by then we had to get out of Europe because you can only stay for 90 days. And the whole reason we went to Europe was reaching back to my retirement being rerouted. I thought we were going to move to Spain. I mean, I've taken tons of Spanish. I'm not quite bilingual, but if I could just be somewhere a year, I'm pretty sure I could get in the groove of it. It'd be okay. Although, boy, they speak a different kind of Spanish in Spain. I was convinced we were going to move to Spain. Everyone was like, oh, it's safe, it's great, blah, blah, blah. The way my pension works out with the tax treaty, I wouldn't be taxed nearly as much as anyone else for just taking, if you just take your straight income to Spain, it's a pretty gnarly tax situation. But if you go with a state pension, the way the tax treaty's set up, it really works out in your favor if you're a state pension. But if you draw money from retirement sources, then it starts to get taxed. But anyway, I thought we were going to move there. And we liked Spain. It was fine. But what didn't work is I didn't realize, this is going to sound so stupid, I just didn't know how much we liked Mexican food. And I didn't expect to find it there. So it wasn't like I went to Spain because I thought they were the same. That's not what I thought. But I thought, much like you can get Thai food or Chinese food, I thought you'd be able to get Mexican food there, just like you can get all food. You travel all over Europe, you can get all kinds of different food. But you can't find good Mexican food. It's just weird. They don't make refried beans, and is, like I said, I know that sounds stupid, but that was part of it. And the other part was the siesta in the afternoon is totally true. It isn't a lie. They take it, they disappear, they come back at 8, and I couldn't get used to eating that late at night. I lost my marbles. I couldn't do it. I tried and tried and tried. However, while we were there, we did get my wife's tooth work started, and it was pretty intense what she needed to do, but it was so wonderful because it was completely straightforward. I went in, they looked at her face, they said, this is what you got to do. They just gave us a spreadsheet. These are the costs. We paid them, and that was it. They just started working on it. And then when we had to get out of Europe, we went to another country, and it was no problem. But anyway, when we decided to get out, it was Malaga, 90 days. So I started looking around. Where do we go from there? We had to go somewhere out of the Schengen zone. So we went to Albania, of all places. I'd never been there, didn't know anything. I was like, cheap tickets, let's go. We went to Albania, went to a town called Tirana, and I knew nothing of the country. And it's been like 30 years since communism left there, maybe a little bit more now, but wow, the marks of communism are fresh there. It's amazing. It's a cool place. I would totally recommend people go visit. But we went at a great time because inflation hadn't caught up with the place. So we were like living la vida loca because our apartment was like $900 a month and it was roomy. We were going out every day eating pizzas for $9 and having crepes for $1 a piece. Coffees that were really good were $1. I mean, it was insane how cheap everything was, because inflation just hadn't caught up with the place. Everything else was expensive. And honestly, it wasn't too expensive in Spain yet either. Everything was still fairly reasonable there. So we had 2 months in Tirana, 2 different apartments. We stayed in this old building that it looked, if you grew up in the era when there was like the Soviet Union and you'd see those movies where they would show you these communist apartment blocks, oh my golly, we stayed in something that totally looked like one of those. But It was fun. 2 months in Tirana. It was great. We had a nice time. It was an interesting country. And then we still needed more time out of the Schengen zone, so we were just kind of bored with Albania. And when we travel, we don't like to drive or do anything because it seems like driving always puts you in the mix of having to deal with the police. And what I mean by that, it's not that I'm going to do bad things, but it just seems like it moves you to another level of complications. And do they want to pull you over? Are you going to get parking tickets? Whatever. It just introduces a whole level of complexity of dealing with cars. So we try not to drive when we travel. And so anyway, we'd seen what we wanted to see. So we went to Turkey. That's what it was. So we went to Istanbul for 2 months, and we stayed in the Asian side in two different apartments, and that was a blast. And again, we hit Turkey at a time when inflation hadn't really taken off there, and we had 2 wonderful months. Turkey was not what I expected. It was a phenomenal country. The people were super, super nice, and I just can't believe how wonderful it was. The food was cheap. The apartment was cheap again because inflation hadn't taken off. My kids like cats. I like cats to a degree, and they're all over the place. And the people were just beyond nice. We stayed in this apartment block, and apartments there, a lot of them have caretakers that seem to be like resident caretakers. I didn't really understand the concept, but there's just a guy that lives in the apartment, usually in the basement or something, and he deals with the trash and the cats, and the people that live there use him to run errands. And it was just a trippy situation, but we made friends with him, and super nice guy. We'd sit in the backyard and talk. And then the other apartment that was at the ground level where we were at, they had kids, and so my kids played with them. And then they had turtles. A lot of people in Turkey had turtles. They were just like wandering around their front yards. It was interesting. So you'd see big piles of lettuce and turtles wandering around. We had a blast. Rode the ferries, went back and forth across the, I don't know, what is the Bosphorus Straits. Just lived like locals. We didn't really do touristy things. We had a little shopping buggy, and we'd load up our cart and go down. We'd go down and get our groceries and struggle with trying to figure out what all the food was at the grocery store. And that's what we did in Spain, and that's what we did in Turkey and Albania. And so, like I said, we were in Turkey for 2 months, and by then we were gone from Spain long enough that it was okay to work out. And anyway, while we were gone, going back to the medical thing that was super easy, my wife had to have some x-rays done for her tooth to check on the progress. It was so great. When we were in Albania, we just wandered into a random dentist, and I said, "Can you do this head scan with the for the x-ray?" And I told them why. And they were like, "Sure, no problem." And then I said, "Oh, and can you get the stitches out of her mouth?" And they were like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." The whole thing was like $75 to get the stitches out and the head scan. And then they sent those x-rays in a file to the dentist in Valencia. Just no problem, super courteous. We showed up, they said come back the next day to get it done. We did it, and it wasn't like, oh, we need to do this, we have to establish you as a patient. Oh, it was so many things in the States are so complicated in that regard, and it's just so annoying. And I figured that out when we were traveling, because I know I hop around a lot. But when we traveled in the States, I wanted to get my teeth cleaned in another state. And they were like, well, we have to establish you as a patient. And I'm like, look, I'm traveling. I just want to get my teeth cleaned. What a pain in the butt. But anyway, we got our teeth cleaned in Albania. And then, and it was like $30 or something. It was so cheap. So we got our teeth cleaned. The kids got their teeth cleaned. But going back to Turkey, we spent our 2 months there. And we could have stayed longer. But we didn't. It was starting to warm up in Europe, so we flew back to Valencia. And by now, things are starting to inflate. It was, what would it be? Summer was coming on. So between summer 2022 coming on and inflation starting to be a thing, Spain started to get expensive. But anyway, we had to fly back to Valencia so my wife could finish the dental work. And keep in mind, we paid already, and we paid all up front with the dentist or orthodontist, whatever they call the people that rebuild your teeth or whatever. And we went back for follow-up appointments. We paid the beginning, and that was it. And we'd been back like 3 times after she had the work done. We left the country, sent the work back. We would text with them on WhatsApp. We went back to Valencia. She had like 3 more appointments, all of this was all part of the original payment. So we still weren't paying for anything because it was all paid up. And that's what was amazing, is I couldn't believe that they weren't trying to add on top of it and say, oh, you owe us for this. It was like, nope, you already paid for whatever, and we're just doing the follow-up work that was all part of the original payment. So, which was great because they, by now things are starting to get more expensive, but that cost was already a sunk cost, so that was nice. So we stayed in Valencia for, I want to say, another month and a half there, following up with her dental work. And by this time, we'd been there so long. Between the last visit and this visit, we were pretty much locals at this point. And we were using the public transportation real straightforward. So we stayed there, and then we ended up moving from there to another town called Sevilla. And this is goofy, but part of the reason we went there was it was super hot, and it made the prices cheap because nobody wanted to stay there in the summer. So we went there, and then they had a Costco, and that was kind of fun because then we got to get a little of the things we were missing, hot dogs and pizza. So we stayed in Sevilla for the rest of summer, and then we found cheap tickets to fly home. After being in Sevilla for the summer, we left in, I want to say, September of that year. September 2022, I think it was. We flew from Barcelona back to San Francisco, and then we made our way back to home from there, which wasn't in California at the time. It was, we lived up in Nevada. And so we just made our way back, and yeah, so that's, I think I'll end the video here on that as far as the end of our Europe escapades. And there's probably way more I could go into as far as the details of those things and how we were looking for what I thought was going to be our European destination for where we were going to retire. But this is that retirement rerouted part, is I thought it was going to be Spain. I had no interest in like France or Italy or any of those other places. Honestly, I would have considered living in Turkey, but there's a lot of isolation that comes in living in a country where your language is not the first language, and I wasn't interested in finding an expat bubble and living in that, because there's a lot of them in Spain with people from England. Yeah, so it just didn't quite click. So, but Turkey is a wonderful place. I would totally go back and tell anyone to visit that place again. The food was so phenomenal, and the people were really, really nice. But again, the Rerouted was the traveling the world didn't quite live up to what I thought, and we didn't end up living in Spain or gelling with it like I thought we were going to. I'd totally go back and visit again, but it's just not where we wanted to. And the other problem with Spain and a lot of countries in Europe, or most of them, is we'd really gotten used to homeschooling, and it wasn't permitted. You have to send the kids to school, and we didn't want to do that. And it was for more reasons than one. It was never about the pandemic stuff. It was always about efficient use of time and flexibility, and my wanting to travel. And our son, who was grown, we had 3 kids that are under, that are school age, and we had a son that was grown. And we had already gone through all the restrictions of school where it was like you could only travel these times, and then the tickets are always expensive. And what I enjoyed about the travel that we were doing with the kids, the younger ones, is we could go when it was cheap. Tickets were cheap, we went. Didn't matter, just go. And all of their schooling was in the internet, so as long as we had Wi-Fi, it was not a problem. And we had really gotten used to schooling in that regard, so that was why I wasn't willing to go back to brick and mortar schooling, as it were, not at least at that point. So yeah, we were back in the States in 2022, and I guess there'll be, I think, one more video will probably finish this up. And if you made it again this far, because this was quite the ramble, thanks.